My name is Alexis Gambis. I'm a French Venezuelan biologist and filmmaker. A lot of my work is at the intersection of biological ideas and magical realism in cinema. And I'm very interested in kind of tackling the lives of scientists in film. I grew up in a family of, my father's an engineer and my mom's a filmmaker. And very early on I was interested in biology, especially fascinated with the idea of genetics and fascinated with the whole idea of DNA, the double helical structure, the foundation of life that is in every cell. And that led me to pursue a career in sciences. I got a PhD in biological sciences, in genetics. I spent 7 years working on insects, working on this little organism called a fruit fly. The scientific name is Drosophila, and it's an insect that is very important because most of the things that we know about genetics comes from the fruit fly. I spent most of my 20s looking at insects through the microscope, looking at fruit flies, which is a model organism. So that's what it's an insect that we use to study genetics. And many of the things that we understand about genes come from research on fruit flies. So my 20s were a bit unusual because I spent them in a laboratory in the Upper East Side at Rockefeller University. And I would have dreams about becoming a little bit like Kafkaesque, becoming an insect. And a lot of my interest in cinema comes from those years working on fruit flies. And also my first movie, The Fly Room, is an adaptation on basically the history of genetics that started in a laboratory called the Fly Room in New York in the 1920s.
You think I don't know? You think I can't see?
Yes. Now, what?
I don't...
They're contaminated, Jack.
Jeez. God.
The world of tomorrow starts tomorrow.
Maybe not consciously, probably unconsciously, a lot of my films focus on our relationship to animals. And usually every film that I make, there's an animal as sort of the centerpiece. I made a film also about my parents that focuses on rats. And then recently I made a film about butterflies, specifically monarch butterflies, which are these butterflies that have one of the longest migrations of any insect. They travel from Canada, they come through the US, and they arrive in Mexico every year. And the monarch butterfly, it's a symbol of many things. It's a symbol for immigration because the monarch butterfly can migrate freely. The other one is that the monarch butterfly is a symbol also for our changing planet. When we start affecting agriculture and plants, we affect, the insect migration and we kill the monarch butterfly. So my film, Son of Monarchs, is a film that combines basically all of these ideas. It talks also about the monarch butterfly being a symbol for los muertos, the dead people, because in Mexican culture, the monarch butterfly arrives on El Día de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead, and represents the ancestors coming back.
Tú tienes un alma vieja. Acuérdate que no eres frágil, eres fuerte.
Yo utilizo CRISPR-Cas9 para modificar los colores de las alas de la mariposa. Explica la evolución, explica la biodiversidad.
So the film, Son of Monarchs, is a film about a Mexican scientist who starts transforming into a monarch butterfly as a way to feel more, as a way to understand his own identity. He's a Mexican scientist, but he lives in the US. He doesn't really know where he belongs, but he, in a way, resonates or feels very much like a monarch butterfly and this ability to kind of cross borders. It's been an interesting process to make films because I treat films like an extension to research. I always have issues with the term filmmaker The term is a bit strange anyway, like a maker of cinema. But every time I tackle a different topic, it's also a way for me to learn a little bit about myself, delve into specific topics in scientific research. I'm really interested in short films as well, because short films, there's a little bit more freedom in a short film. You can experiment more. With feature films, you have a lot more, strings attached. It's bigger productions, there's more people, you don't have that much flexibility. I made this film during my years in film school at New York University. That is, something that I'm really fascinated with in film is blurring the lines between documentary and fiction. The idea of the film was to use archives of my own childhood, because my father used to film me, but I have a lot of my childhood recorded on these tapes.
Qu'est-ce que tu t'en fous? Qu'est-ce que tu t'en fous? Au contraire, il y aura une preuve que tu as écrit une histoire.
Eh papa, t'es chiant, hein?
And use that as a basis to make a fiction about a scientist who works on memory that is trying to reconnect with his father that is sick.
T'es arrivé ce matin?
Non, je suis arrivé hier soir. And it's a film that's sort of like a little bit like Proust, à la recherche du temps perdu, like In Search of Lost Time. It's like him trying to not only look back at the past for answers about his relationship with his father, but also recreate the past.
Il y a le zoom là-haut si tu veux. Hein.
Elle s'aime pas, Maya. C'est plaisant pour ta mère.
Tu sais comment ça marche?
Elle s'aime pas, sa mère.
Voilà,
en fait,
c'est comme ça qu'il faut faire. Très bien.
Voilà, c'est ce que je veux faire.
So I made this film where I had my parents act in the film. They're playing my parents, but it's fiction.
Tu penses que c'est le moment de juger ton père comme ça?
In the film, the scientist, which is me, probably the only film that I will ever act in, but this was one of them, he works on memory in rats. So a lot of my work is based on a film movement, a science and film movement called the Science New Wave, which is all about kind of broadening how we think about science in moving image and in cinema. The idea is to really kind of be flexible in terms of how we bring science into narratives, whether it's fiction, whether it's documentary, whether it's animation, whether it's field work. And I'm a really firm believer that, that there's so much to play with and experiment with, and also stay faithful to scientific ideas. But there's just, what we see right now on the screen is just a tiny fraction of what is possible in terms of bringing science onto the big screen. When La Nouvelle Vague, when the French New Wave started, it was a movement that brought together filmmakers, economists, anthropologists. But the idea of the movement was to disrupt the film industry, to show people that there's other ways of making films.
Hôpital, service chirurgie cardiovasculaire. Il est où le zoom?
Il n'y a pas de zoom sur cette caméra. Arrête, s'il te plaît. A lot of my films are rooted in the optimism of science being able to kind of change the world. And it's more than that, science being sort of a universal language, right? This idea that we can understand relationships between humans and between our relationship to our planet through science. That although there are many issues around science, climate change, extinction, pollution, there is still sort of a belief in science. I firmly believe that.